How's it going, everybody? It's Milwaukee coming back at you once again, and today we're going to be discussing Star Trek: The Captain's Oath by Christopher L. Bennett. Let's get into it. The Captain's Oath is a book detailing the early years, or I should say, the latter years of Kirk's last command before he takes over the Enterprise and embarks on his 5-year mission. Although I'm pretty sure the show Strange New Worlds has already come through and overwritten this, but that's just the nature of the beast. When it comes to Star Trek novels, there's no real continuity, as far as I could tell. There used to be, but with Kurtzman Trek, it kind of overwrites anything. Even though this book is considered new Trek, because it was published in 2019, it's already been overwritten, so make of that what you will. That doesn't mean the story contained within is bad. It doesn't mean it's not worth reading. It just means that, you know, it may not hold up in the long run. The reason why I chose to read this book was because I was looking to get into Star Trek, and I wanted something to act as like an introduction. The Captain's Oath is about Captain Kirk before he takes on the captaincy of the Enterprise and starts their 5-year journey. So I figured it would be a good primer for me to learn about what is Starfleet, what is the Federation, who are some of the key alien races in the Star Trek universe. But unfortunately, with this book, I really didn't get a lot of that. Now, as for that story, we follow primarily two main plot lines. One with Kirk dealing with relics from an ancient civilization that have been recently discovered, that another civilization wants to terraform over, and whether or not that civilization is justified in doing so, or whether or not it's correct to let the past die and you sort of pave over it to forge ahead new. And the other plot line is a new alien race coming into Federation space. They're unknown to Starfleet and the Federation. They seem to be technologically advanced, and at every turn when the Starfleet goes up against them, they beat Starfleet back. So it's up to Captain Kirk to find a way to defeat these aliens or have them join the Federation. And that's basically the crux of the story. Two major plot lines. They're both pretty decent, but they're not without their flaws. They're not without their problems. And because we're following two storylines, we don't really get that satisfaction of one complete story. And the book does seem choppy, especially because it jumps around time periods. And I'll get into that more coming up. One problem I had with the book is the fact that it constantly jumps back and forth between time periods like 2262, 2263, 64, 65. Characters, they don't all live through the book. In fact, Captain Kirk holds a lot of L's there in this book. It makes me surprised that he advanced and become the youngest captain, of the Enterprise, because he loses crew members, he loses ships, he loses battles, he loses debates, and yet he's always, moving ahead. But the book has a reason for that too, and we'll get into that later. But yeah, oftentimes with the jumping back and forth, with characters like Kirk learns a lesson in 2262 that he takes with him to 2264 when he re-encounters this character, and we're supposed to remember who this is. But they were like, well, where is this guy? But oh wait, they died in the space battle, and the constant changing of the bridge crew. It can be a little confusing, but you could deal with it. But it just didn't make for a great read. It feels choppy. You don't really get necessarily a complete story because, like I said, it's constant jumping around. Sometimes Kirk's at the hospital, checking out injured crew members. Then he's working on Starbase 24. Now he's out on Border Patrol. But here he is, discovering a new race of aliens. Another issue I had with the book is that there's just too many characters. We get to see different iterations of Kirk's bridge on the various ships that he captains. And some of the crew members come along, others don't. Some die, others get injured, others retire, some come back. It's just a lot of characters to keep track of, and really none of them, at the end of the day, matter. They're not the Enterprise characters that you're looking for. It's not Spock. It's not Dr. McCoy, although he comes and goes. It's just these nobodies that, ultimately they just serve to be there as people to talk about, because a lot of the book is just Kirk interacting with these characters. And so oftentimes I would find going on Google, going, who is this character? And it turns out, oh, that's the Klingon from the episode Trouble with Tribbles. Kirk encountered him here. He's going to encounter him, later on in the show. These characters are now going to have a history. Or there's this whole, not a plot line, but they give this character named Gary Mitchell. He's like Kirk's best friend throughout his whole life. Every captaincy Kirk has, he requests Gary Mitchell to be on his bridge, even on the Enterprise. And then so I'm like, who the hell is Gary Mitchell? He's not exactly Spock. I don't know this guy. So I look him up, and well, if you know, you know. Same thing with a guy named Kelso. There's a lot of characters that get thrown around in this book that get a lot of page time dedicated to them. That just they're from the show, and if you know their fates or what happens to them, it's kind of like a waste. The book also, gets sort of like preachy at times. There's a scene in the book where there's an alien character who's like he wants to be a captain, but he hasn't become a captain yet. And Captain Kirk, of course, is the fastest rising captain in Starfleet. And his whole argument to Kirk is that Kirk's only advancing because he's like a straight white male. If he was an alien, he wouldn't have the privileges that Kirk has. And it's just there's also speeches about Native American genocide and the enslavement of black people, and how America's bad and stuff like that in the book. So if you don't like that stuff, just realize that the book was written in 2019, and you're going to be getting a lot of that. The moral preaching. Again, maybe it doesn't bother you, but I'm just tired of hearing stuff like that. But I should have known better. This is New Trek after all. Another thing I wanted to touch on here is the Prime Directive. Like I said, I don't know a lot about Star Trek, but I know about the Prime Directive, or at least what it's supposed to be. Don't interfere with pre-warp civilizations. Don't expose, what your mission is, your level of technology to these pre-warp civilizations, so that they continue to develop as they would naturally develop without, your interference. And in this book, we deal with the Prime Directive a lot. Kirk comes up on at least 2 new civilizations, and each time he bends the Prime Directive. It really comes down to the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law, and what's morally superior in the moment. Do we expose technology to these new aliens that they wouldn't otherwise have seen if it gives them a chance to live a life? And then the whole thing becomes what they choose to do with the knowledge, how they live with that knowledge, not whether or not they know about the knowledge. And it's it's whatever. Personally, I would kind of like to see Kirk stick to the Prime Directive, so the Prime Directive has meaning. I haven't seen a lot of Star Trek, but I have seen episodes where Kirk would come between the Prime Directive, where Kirk would get stuck, between the Prime Directive and the hard place to have to make a decision. But maybe the whole Prime Directive thing is always getting subverted and thwarted by captains throughout the series, and that's like the whole point. I don't know. I just would have liked to see, at least some repercussions from it, because not only is Kirk bending the Prime Directive, but there's multiple instances in the book his officers are, defying orders and like breaking the rules, and Kirk's like, "Oh, that's okay, don't worry about it." And I'm like, really? There's no military repercussions for going rogue or anything like that? Again, what are even all the rules? I don't know. Another issue I had with the book was the fake tension. It's kind of hard when you're writing prequels to put tension in your story because the characters are just not going to die, right? But with the 2 major plot lines here on this book, Kirk, again, at the 11th hour, he has to jump in there, put himself in danger. He has to get his fist fight in, and it just there's no tension there. You're doing the equivalent of checking your watch during a movie, which is checking the page count left in the book. You're like, "Oh, I got 40 pages left in this book. Can we wrap it up, please? This is doing nothing for me." There's no tension. There's no drama. Could have done without it. We get the diplomatic speech at the end anyway. The moral lesson. So overall, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and give Star Trek The Captain's Oath by Christopher L. Bennett a 3 out of 5. Like I said, as someone who was looking to come into Star Trek with this book, it wasn't a bad read, but it's made more so for hardcore fans. You're going to get a lot more out of it if you know the series intimately, and you get these Easter eggs, you get these references. You're just going to get more mileage out of the book that way. Like I said, for me, coming into it, hoping to learn about Starfleet, hoping to learn about the Federation, hoping to learn about Captain Kirk before the 5-year mission. Didn't really get that. I got some of that, but a lot of it is irrelevant to the show. not going to be mentioned in the show because it was written, after the show. But if that's just the nature of the beast, and until next time, I'll see you there.